Welcome back.
The term alien has become synonymous with little green men in sci-fi horror classics.
However, with recent developments showing facehuggers on Mars, and even Vatican officials acknowledging there could be intelligent life out there somewhere, there is increasing evidence to support that we are not alone.
From mystery lights to horrifying abductions, we explore 10 of the most convincing alien encounter stories.
Pascagoula River. Enjoying a quiet evening of fishing, co-workers 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker thought the evening of October the 11th, 1973 would be like any other. How wrong they were. While fishing off the west bank of the Pascagoula River, the two men reported hearing a whirring sound, quickly followed by two flashing blue lights and an oval-shaped object which they claim was over 30 feet across and 10 feet high. In their report to the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office, the pair told officers they were conscious but paralysed as three creatures took them aboard the object and subjected them to an examination before releasing them. The pair later described the creatures as robot-like aliens just over 5 feet tall, lacking a neck, exhibiting only slits for eyes and mouth, a nose and ears that were sharply pointed and possessed clawed hands. The legs were joined and the entity glided, not walked. Charles Hickson died the 9th of September 2011, aged 80. He maintained the truth of his alien encounter to his grave.
The Moor Alien. Back across the pond now to Ilkley, Yorkshire, where one of the most unique alien abductions is said to have taken place. An eerie setting said to be able to scare you to death during the daylight, let alone at night. The Ilkley Moors are a place of mystery. With the boulders etched with strange markings, the swastika stone, the badger stone, and the 12 Apostles stone circle, it's no wonder the Moors hold legends of hovering lights and UFOs. Early morning, December the 1st, 1987, ex-police officer Philip Spencer was walking across the moors to his father-in-law's house, hoping along the way to catch some images of the moors' famed light tricks with his ASA-rated camera film. While looking for some angles through his lens, Philip caught sight of a strange-looking being in the slopes ahead of him, which seemed to be gesturing for him to stay away. The creature then fled, and not thinking clearly, Philip ran after it, arriving just in time to catch a glimpse of a flying ship with a white square atop. Dazed and a little confused about what he had seen, Philip set off towards the nearest village. Upon arrival, he noticed some strange things. His compass now pointed in the opposite direction to which it should be, and his watch read an hour behind the village clock. Where had that hour gone? To confirm to himself he hadn't imagined the whole ordeal, Philip quickly had the film developed, and sure enough, there in the picture was the creature. It looked to be about 4 foot tall, with a bluish-green tinge to its skin. The photograph has since been examined by wildlife, UFO and Kodak specialists, who all confirm the creature is no known animal. It was part of the original image and was not superimposed. Even more, upon computer enhancement in the US, a white square was revealed in the exact spot Spencer claimed to have seen the UFO. Did he unwittingly catch an image of his abductor's ship?
Linda Napolitano. A case which has caused a lot of controversy, but is one of the most compelling alien abduction stories to date, as it has something many others do not. Witnesses. November 30th, 1989, 3 a.m. Linda was sleeping in her Manhattan apartment when she was pulled from bed by a beam of light and floated out of her 12th floor apartment window. She recalled ascending to a UFO in a bluish beam of light, escorted by 3 greys. At the time, Linda was unable to recall many of the details of her abduction, but through regressive hypnosis and witness statements, a bigger picture was gathered. A year later, 2 eyewitnesses came forward, claiming to have seen the whole event. Skeptical at first, their claims were looked into, and sure enough, without ever having had contact with Napolitano, Their reports agreed in all aspects with Linda's memories. Eventually, these witnesses were identified as the bodyguards to a senior UN statesman who also witnessed Linda's abduction and was said to have been left visibly shaken. All details of the abduction were kept private until the investigator, Hopkins, was convinced the case was complete enough to go public. During this time, more and more witnesses came forward with their accounts of what they had seen. Witnesses from the Brooklyn Bridge and spectators believing they had seen filming taking place for a new sci-fi movie.
Sergeant Charles Moody. August the 13th, 1975, 1:15 a.m. US aircraft pilot Sergeant Moody was in the New Mexico desert observing a meteor shower when he saw a glowing metallic disc falling to the ground around 300 meters ahead of him. Moody claims the object was around 50 feet long and 20 feet wide. The UFO descended to an altitude of around 15 to 20 feet and wobbled on its axis as it moved slowly and steadily towards Moody. Terrified, he ran to his car and attempted to turn the ignition, but the car wouldn't start. The ship came to a stop around 70 feet away. Charles reports hearing a high-pitched humming sound and seeing human-like figures through rectangular windows on the ship. The noise stopped, and Charles felt numbness creep over his body. The next thing Moody remembered is seeing the object rise into the sky and disappear into the distance. Petrified, Moody turned his car key, which started the engine immediately, and rushed home where he soon realised it was 3 a.m. He had lost over an hour. The next morning, Moody had a pain in his lower back, and as the days progressed, his whole body broke out into a rash. Upon the recommendation of a physician, Moody began to practice self-hypnosis to piece together what had happened in the missing time. Over the next few weeks, Moody was able to almost completely recall the horrifying events of that night. As the numbness descended, Moody recalled seeing two beings around 6 feet tall and wearing skin-tight black clothing approaching his car. After some initial resistance, Moody was rendered unconscious. He awoke on a slab inside the ship where he was examined by what he described as the alien leader. Distinguishable by his silver clothing, like the others, he had a large hairless head, a protruding brow, roundish eyes and small ears and nose, and very thin lips. His skin was whitish grey. Moody was later given a tour of the craft and told he would see the aliens again, but not for another 20 years. The leader informed him he would have no recollection of their encounter until 2 weeks later, and then laying his hands on Moody's head, he rendered him unconscious once more. An analysis of Moody's claims by Charles McQuiston, co-inventor of the psychological stress evaluator, indicated he was telling the truth.
Antonio Villas-Boas. Antonio Villas-Boas was a Brazilian farmer and later in life a lawyer who claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrials in 1957. Though similar stories had circulated for years beforehand, Villas-Boas's claims were among the first alien abduction stories to receive wide attention. At the time of his abduction, Villas-Boas was a 23-year-old Brazilian farmer who was working at night to avoid the hot temperatures of the day. On October 16, 1957, he was ploughing fields when he saw what he described as a red star in the night sky. According to his story, this star approached his position, growing in size until it became recognisable as a roughly circular craft. The craft began descending to land in the field. At that point, Boas decided to run from the scene. According to Boas, he first attempted to leave the scene on his tractor, but when its lights and engine died after travelling only a short distance, he decided to continue on foot. However, he was seized by a 5-foot-tall humanoid who was wearing grey coveralls and a helmet. Its eyes were small and blue, and instead of speech it made noises like barks or yelps. 3 similar beings then joined the first in subduing Boas, and they dragged him inside their craft. Once inside, Boas said that he was stripped of his clothing and covered from head to toe with a strange gel. He was then led into a large room through a doorway that had strange red symbols written over it. In this room, the beings took samples of Boas's blood from his chin. After this, he was taken to a third room and left alone for around half an hour. During this time, some kind of gas was pumped into the room, which made Boas become violently ill. Shortly after, Boas claimed that he was joined in the room by another humanoid. This one, however, was female, very attractive, and naked. She was the same height as the other beings he had encountered, with a small, pointed chin and large blue cat-like eyes. The hair on her head was long and white, somewhat like platinum blonde, but her underarm and pubic hair were bright red. Boas said he was strongly attracted to the woman, and the two had sexual intercourse. During this act, Boas noted that the female did not kiss him, but instead nipped him on the chin. When Boas returned home, he discovered that 4 hours had passed.
The Buff Ledge Abduction. Buff Ledge was a girls' camp located north of Burlington on Lake Champlain. During their time as summer camp employees, Michael Lapp, a 16-year-old maintenance man, and 19-year-old water ski instructor Janet Cornell were relaxing at a boat dock on a quiet day. Late in the afternoon, the two friends were enjoying the view of the sun setting over the water, when a bright light appeared in the darkening sky. As the two watched the light in fascination, 3 smaller lights seemed to drop from the larger one, which quickly moved up and disappeared from sight. The 3 smaller objects began to move over the lake. The objects put on a show for Michael and Janet, doing zigzag maneuvers, loops, and descended like falling leaves. The 3 objects now moved even closer to the 2 amazed teenagers. After forming a triangle, 2 of the objects pulled back. The one remaining UFO passed over Michael and Janet, then shot upward and momentarily disappeared. It very soon reappeared, tilted to one side, and dropped into the lake. A couple of minutes seemed to pass before the object re-emerged from the water and began gliding straight toward them. The object was now close enough to see a transparent dome occupied by 2 childlike creatures. Michael described the beings as having elongated necks, big heads and no hair. Their eyes were also large and extended around the side of their heads. Michael began to sense a kind of mental communication with the 2 beings. Watching them intently, Michael slapped his knee, and to his surprise, one of the occupants mimicked his movement. The craft now moved directly overhead and shot a beam at Michael and Janet. Grabbing Janet's shoulder, Michael pulled both of them on their backs on the dock. Suddenly, Michael was overcome with the fear of being kidnapped. Their next conscious thoughts would be that of staring at the object again from the dock. The sky was now totally black, and Michael wondered how long he had been in that one spot. Looking at Janet, he could see that she was in a trance-like state, drowsy and disorientated. It was to be 10 years after his harrowing experience that Michael made a decision to contact the Centre for UFO Studies and search for answers. Investigator Walter Webb was assigned to the case, and after hearing Michael's story, suggested regressive hypnosis to help rid him of his emotional strife and frightening dreams. During Michael's hypnosis, he vividly recalled his experiences on that night in August 1968. He remembered how the beam of light lifted him into the craft's interior, how he entered a bigger craft, and how he saw Janet lying on a table being examined. The small beings shined a light into her eyes, scraped her skin and took fluids from her body. The aliens all looked alike, Michael recalled, and had those large eyes, a mouth without lips, no ears, and 2 small openings for a nose. Michael also described the beings as having 3 pointed, web-like digits for fingers, and their bodies felt damp and clammy. The aliens related to Michael that their mission was to make life like ours, other places. Janet also underwent the regression, and her descriptions only went to verify Michael's. She recalled feeling cold on the examining table, with something pulling her hair and pinching her neck. The abduction of Michael Lapp and Janet Cornell certainly follows other similar patterns of abductions reported by many others.
Robert Taylor. Back in the UK now and up to Scotland. On the morning of November 9th, 1979, forestry worker Robert Taylor parked his pickup on a side road with his dog. He headed into Deshmont Woods to check the progress of some recently planted saplings. It was a few hundred metres in and partway up Deshmont Law that Taylor encountered the strange object, which he described later as spherical and over 20 foot in diameter. The sphere camouflaged and hovered a few feet off the ground. As Taylor approached the object, it became agitated. Two smaller spheres dropped from its underside and began rolling towards the astonished Taylor. The small spheres circled, then moved in and attached themselves to Taylor's clothing, all the while emitting an acrid odour which caused his head to spin. Seconds later, the forester, now being pulled forcefully by the small spheres in the direction of the large sphere, lost consciousness. Upon regaining consciousness, Taylor found himself alone, except for his dog, which was barking furiously. Disorientated and unable to speak, he staggered back to his truck, which because of his poor condition he ran off the road partway home, forcing him to walk the remaining distance. Opening the door to his home, he presented a sorry state, dishevelled, covered in mud, his trousers torn, his voice croaking. He struggled to tell his wife of his strange encounter. After hearing his tale, his wife urged him to call the police, but Taylor refused, phoning his supervisor, Malcolm Drummond, instead. A doctor was also called. Later that day, after cleaning up, but suffering from a headache and complaining of being gassed, he returned with Drummond to the scene of the incident. There they found strange markings. Some looked like the rungs of a ladder, while others appeared to be indentations left by the projections on the small spheres. The police were eventually contacted, but having never been involved in a UFO investigation, were initially at a loss as to how to proceed. Statements were taken from all concerned, and a forensic examination was conducted on Taylor's trousers. A police examination of the area revealed the obvious, that something had made the ground marks, but as there were no tracks either entering or leaving, helicopters were ruled out. Exactly what was the cause was never determined.
Dr. Herbert Hopkins. This alien encounter reminds me of the TV series Fringe and their observers. Could they be based on this account? Dr. Herbert Hopkins, a 58-year-old doctor and hypnotist, was acting as consultant on an alleged UFO teleportation case in Maine, USA. One evening, when his wife and children had gone out, leaving him alone, the telephone rang, and a man identifying himself as Vice President of the New Jersey UFO Research Organization asked him if he might visit Dr. Hopkins that evening to discuss certain details of the case. The doctor agreed. He went to the back door to switch on the light so that his visitor would be able to find his way from the parking lot. But while he was there, he noticed the man was already climbing the porch steps. The man was dressed in a black suit, black hat, shoes, tie and a white shirt. His clothes were immaculate, suit unwrinkled, trousers sharply creased. When he took off his hat, he revealed himself as completely hairless, not only bald, but without eyebrows or eyelashes. His skin was dead white, his lips bright red. In the course of their conversation, he happened to brush his lips with his grey suede gloves, and the doctor was astonished to see that his lips were smeared and that the gloves were stained with lipstick. During the visit, the strange man made several observations about Dr. Hopkins. Particularly odd was the fact that his visitor stated that his host had 2 coins in his pocket. It was indeed the case. He then asked the doctor to put one of the coins in his hand and to watch the coin, not himself. As Hopkins watched, the coin seemed to go out of focus and then gradually vanish. "Neither you nor anyone else on this plane will ever see that coin again," the visitor told him. After talking a little while longer on UFO topics, Dr. Hopkins suddenly noticed that the visitor's speech was slowing down. The man rose unsteadily to his feet and said very slowly, "My energy is running low. Must go now. goodbye. Dr. Hopkins saw a bright light shining in the driveway, bluish white and distinctly brighter than a normal car lamp. As for the New Jersey UFO Research Organization, no such institution exists.
Peter Curie. An encounter now with some similarities to that of Antonio Villas Boas, and as many questions raised as that of Linda Napolitano. In this case there were no witnesses, but something even more compelling: DNA. The subject of this encounter, Peter Curie, was born in Lebanon in 1964 and moved to Australia in 1973. Peter and his wife Vivian claimed to have had numerous encounters with aliens, reporting 4 hooded figures around their bed, causing them temporary paralysis. However, one encounter stands out amongst the others, as like Villas Boas, Curie claims to have had a sexual encounter with an alien being. 7:30 in the morning, July 23, 1992. Curie had been in bed off work due to illness. Suddenly he bolted wide awake and sat up. There were 2 humanoid females sitting on the bed, both entirely naked. Peter was able to describe the women in detail. These 2 women looked human in nearly every way, had well-proportioned adult bodies. One looked somewhat Asian, with straight, dark, shoulder-length hair and dark eyes. The other looked perhaps Scandinavian, with light-coloured eyes and long blonde hair that fell halfway down her back. But Curie felt that these women were not exactly human. Their faces were somewhat odd, not unattractive, but too chiselled, with very high cheekbones and eyes that were 2 or 3 times larger than normal. Curie took special notice of the blonde. Her face was too long, he felt. The blonde seemed to be in charge. Curie thought she was communicating telepathically with the dark-haired woman. Though stunned by the sudden appearance of the women, Curie had only a few moments to consider how they could possibly have arrived in his bedroom, before the blonde reached out with both her hands and cupped the back of his head, drawing his face towards her chest. Curie resisted, but reported that the blonde was very strong. She pulled him towards her breast and he bit her nipple. A small piece came off in his mouth. The woman did not cry out in pain. Involuntarily, Curie swallowed the small fragment in his mouth and it caught in his throat. He went into a coughing fit. Suddenly the 2 women disappeared. Once he realised the women were gone, he tried to clear his throat by drinking water. It didn't work. Then he had the urge to go to the bathroom. He realised that his penis felt very painful. Standing in the bathroom, he pulled back the foreskin and found 2 thin blonde strands of hair wrapped tightly around. He struggled to unravel the pieces of hair as the pain became an intense burning sensation. Finally, he managed to remove the 2 pieces and immediately put them in a small sealable plastic bag. The pieces of hair, carefully stored away since the encounter, became the subject of the first openly reported scientific DNA test on a possible abduction-related sample. The blonde hairs were extremely thin and almost clear in colour. It was determined that the hair was not chemically treated because if it had been, little or no mitochondrial DNA could have been recovered. However, good quality DNA was recovered. For comparison, samples were also taken of Peter Curie's hair and that of his wife Vivian. DNA was successfully extracted from Peter's hair, but no usable DNA was recovered from Vivian's hair, possibly because of chemical treatment. After thorough testing of the hair samples, the scientists of the Anomaly Physical Evidence Group arrived at a startling conclusion. The thin blonde hair, which appeared to have come from a light-skinned Caucasian-type woman, could not have come from a normal human of that racial type. Instead, though human, the hair showed 5 distinctive DNA markers that are characteristic of a rare subgroup of Chinese Mongoloid racial type. Only 4 other people were on record with all 5 distinctive markers. All 4 were Chinese, with black hair.
Travis Walton. Although occurring 40 years ago, the Travis Walton abduction story remains one of the best known incidents of apparent alien abduction. The story begins on Wednesday, November the 5th, 1975. Then 22 years old, Walton was employed by Mike Rogers, who had for 9 years contracted with the US States Forest Service for various duties. Rogers and Walton were best friends. Rogers was hired to thin out scrub bush and undergrowth from a large area near Turkey Springs, Arizona. The job was the most lucrative contract Rogers had received from the Forest Service, but the job was behind schedule. As a result, they worked overtime to fulfill the contract, typically from 6 AM until sunset. Just after 6 PM on November the 5th, Rogers and his crew finished their work shift for the day and piled into Rogers' truck for the drive back to Snowflake. The crew reported that shortly after beginning the drive home, they saw a bright yellowish light from behind a hill. They drove closer and said they saw a large golden disc hovering above a clearing and shining brightly. It hovered below the tops of the trees around 15 feet over a pile of logging slash. It was about 8 feet high and 20 feet in diameter. Rogers stopped the truck and Walton leapt out and ran towards the disc. The others said they shouted at Walton to come back, but he continued towards the disc. They noticed Walton stepping backwards. The men in the truck reported that Walton was nearly below the object when the disc began making noises similar to a loud turbine. The disc then began to wobble from side to side, and Walton began to cautiously walk away from the object. Just after Walton moved away from the disc, the others insisted they saw a beam of green-blue light coming from the disc and strike Walton. The crew report that Walton rose a foot in the air, his arms and legs outstretched, and shot back stiffly some 10 feet, all the while caught in the glow of the light. His right shoulder hit the earth, and his body sprawled limply over the ground. In fear, the other crew members fled the scene, returning after a short period of time to find no trace of the UFO or of Walton. The next several days were marked by unsuccessful searches for missing Walton, including some use of helicopters and dogs. Temperatures dropped below zero the first 2 nights of the search, dimming hope that he was alive. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials were looking for alternative explanations of the event, including the possibility that Walton had been murdered. Walton turned up 5 days later, confused and distraught but with fleeting memories of alien and exotic human entities. That's all for tonight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter.
And make sure you like, share and subscribe for more New Fusion action.
I've been CJ.
I've been LJ. Sleep tight.